Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me right now, because what I'm about to tell you might just change the way you see love forever. There's a moment, a shift, a spark that happens. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss it. Because it doesn't come with a grand confession. It doesn't come with a dozen roses or a serenade under the moonlight. No. When someone with an avoidant attachment style starts to fall in love, it happens quietly but powerfully. And when you see the signs, when they start acting in that way, I'm here to tell you, they're not just interested, they're falling fast. Now I want you to imagine someone who's spent most of their life holding the world at arm's length. Someone who's learned, maybe through pain, maybe through betrayal, that it's safer to rely on themselves. Someone who's built walls so high and so thick, even they don't know how to tear them down. You've met this person. Maybe you've been this person. They're independent, confident, they've got their life together. But when it comes to real intimacy, they back off, they disappear, they disconnect. But then something changes. The pivot point. They start showing up. They check in. They remember the little things. They might not say, I love you, but their actions scream it. They open up. Not all at once. No. But piece by piece, like a puzzle, they're finally willing to let someone solve. They make space for you in their life. They let you in, not just physically, but emotionally. And that, my friends, that is a revolution in their world. Here's the truth. When an avoidant starts prioritizing you over their precious solitude, when they start inviting you into their inner world, when they let you see their vulnerability, even if just for a moment, that's not just affection, that's not just interest. Cat is love, raw, unfiltered, real. Because for someone who's learned to survive by staying distant, letting someone in isn't just a choice, it's a leap of faith. It's them saying, I'm scared, but I'm willing to try. That is courage. That is growth. That is the beginning of something extraordinary. So if you're lucky enough to witness that shift, don't ignore it. Don't demand perfection. Don't rush the process. Recognize what it means. Honor the bravery it takes. And if you're the avoidant, if you've been holding people out for years, maybe now is the time to ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped running? What would happen if you just let someone in? Because love isn't weakness. Love isn't surrender. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, and it's meant to set you free. So when an avoidant starts acting like this, when they start choosing connection over comfort, honesty over safety, love over fear, they're not just falling. They're diving. Heart first, no parachute, no backup plan. And that, my friends, is the real beginning of love. When someone with an avoidant attachment style begins to show up consistently, it's one of the clearest signs that something inside them is shifting on a deep level. Avoidants are not naturally consistent in emotional intimacy. Their instinct is to pull back, to protect, to retreat, when things start feeling too close or too demanding. For them, emotional consistency often feels like a trap, something that threatens their sense of independence and control. But when that same person starts showing up with regularity, making contact not out of obligation but out of desire, it's not just behavior, it's transformation. In the world of avoidance, inconsistency is a defense mechanism. It's not laziness, and it's not that they don't care. It's that closeness has often equated to pain. Somewhere in their past, they learned that vulnerability could cost them their safety. So they build distance. They rely on space. They thrive in independence. And they often romanticize solitude because it keeps them from getting hurt. But love, true love, begins to rewrite that internal script. It introduces a new pattern, a new rhythm. And one of the first signs of that shift is consistency. Suddenly, they're the one texting first. Not every time, but often enough to notice they follow up. They remember important dates. They start to check in, even if there's no need to. That shift might be subtle, but it's profound. It means they're thinking about you even when you're not around. It means they've opened up a mental and emotional space where your presence is not only welcome, but expected. And that's a huge departure from how they typically operate. Avoidants are masters at compartmentalizing. They keep people in boxes, safe little containers that don't spill over into other areas of their life. But when they start acting with consistency, it means you're no longer in that box. You've moved into something more integrated. They're letting you into their rhythm, their routine, their life. You're not just an experience, you're becoming part of their foundation. And they're not doing it because they feel pressure. They're doing it because something in them wants to. That desire to connect, to reach out, to be near, that's love gaining ground. You'll notice their tone changes. Their language becomes more inclusive. We, us, ours. They might not even realize they're doing it, but it happens. And with that comes a shift in energy. Avoidants who used to flinch at too much closeness now start to lean in. Maybe they still need space, and maybe they still take time to process, but they keep showing up. They don't disappear in conflict. They don't vanish after an intense emotional exchange. They stay, they return, they try. And trying is everything. This new pattern of consistent effort isn't about grand romantic gestures. It's in the everyday moments, the good morning text, the random call in the middle of a busy day, the invitation to join them in something they'd usually do alone. These are not just acts of kindness, they're acts of trust. For someone who fears closeness, repetition is risky. Predictability in relationships can feel like vulnerability. So when an avoidant begins to engage in those rituals, they're taking emotional risks. Quiet ones, brave ones, real ones. It's important to understand that this kind of consistency doesn't mean they've stopped being avoidant. Attachment styles don't just vanish. They evolve. The avoidant still exists, still feels the pull toward distance when overwhelmed, still has the urge to retreat when things get too intense. But love begins to override that impulse. Not erase it, but challenge it. Love introduces friction, and that friction creates growth. Consistency becomes a battleground for transformation. Every time they reach out instead of withdrawing, every time they answer the phone instead of letting it ring out, every time they follow up instead of ghosting, that's not just behavior change, that's internal war. And you're watching them win it, moment by moment. Not because someone demanded it, not because they're forcing it, but because for the first time, the desire to connect is stronger than the fear of it. You might see them struggle with it. There may be moments where they backslide, get quiet, or seem cold. That's part of the process. But if you step back and look at the overall pattern, you'll see the upward trend. You'll see that they're no longer avoiding consistency. They're choosing it. Day by day, interaction by interaction. And that choice, made over and over again, is the clearest sign that love is beginning to take root. When an avoidant starts to let you see their vulnerability, it doesn't happen with dramatic confessions or open emotional displays. It happens in the small cracks, in the unguarded moments, in the subtle shifts that many people might overlook. Vulnerability for someone with an avoidant attachment style is not just uncomfortable, it's terrifying. It runs counter to everything they've learned to survive. For much of their life, they've relied on emotional self-sufficiency as a shield. They protect themselves through distance, control, and by avoiding the kind of emotional exposure that could leave them feeling weak, dependent, or rejected. So when they begin to peel back even the smallest layer of their inner world It's not casual, it's monumental. The signs are rarely loud. You might not get long heart-to-hearts right away. You might not see tears or hear them speak openly about their past. But you will notice when the armor begins to loosen. They might share something seemingly small, like a childhood memory they never talk about. Or they'll reveal something they struggled with, an insecurity, a moment of self-doubt, a fear they've kept buried. And in that moment, they're not just telling you a story. They're testing the waters. They're saying, can I trust you with this? Because for the avoidant, vulnerability is deeply linked with danger. They've been taught that to be open is to be at risk. So every time they let you see a piece of their internal world, it's a risk they're consciously taking. They might not label it as vulnerability. They might act like it's no big deal. They'll downplay it, brush it off with humor, or quickly change the subject. But don't let that fool you. That brief opening was intentional. It means they felt a flicker of safety in your presence. They felt just enough emotional security to let the mask slip, even if just for a second. And once that door opens, even slightly, it tends to open again, because connection, once experienced safely, becomes addictive, even to the person who spent their life avoiding it. You may begin to notice more emotional expression in their tone, in their eyes, in the pauses between their words. They'll start saying things they used to withhold. I missed you. That actually hurt. I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to try. These aren't just statements, they're acts of courage. Because for someone who's used to pushing people away, letting someone see that they feel something, anything, can feel like walking into a fire without armor. And they'll likely do it clumsily at first. Vulnerability doesn't come naturally to them. They've spent years building the skill of emotional detachment, not emotional expression. So when they start opening up, it might not be polished. It might come out in half sentences, indirect metaphors, or awkward silences. They may even get angry or withdrawn after being vulnerable, as if they regret letting the curtain fall. That's not a sign they didn't mean it. It's a sign they're overwhelmed by it. Their system is used to shutting down after emotional exposure, so sometimes that old pattern kicks in. But if you look closely, you'll see them fighting it. You'll see them circling back, reopening, trying again. Vulnerability for avoidance often looks like contradiction. One moment they're telling you something deeply personal, the next they're backing off, acting like everything's fine, pretending like nothing happened. But that back and forth isn't a lack of care. It's the tug of war between old programming and new desire. Their heart wants connection. Their mind fears the consequences. And in the space between those two forces is where their vulnerability lives. They may also show vulnerability through action, not words. Letting you see their home when it's messy. Letting you into their daily routine. Letting you be present during moments of stress when they're not at their best. These aren't dramatic events, but they're significant. Because an avoidance comfort zone is performance and control. When they let you witness the moments where they're not in control, where they're anxious, emotional, or struggling, that's real intimacy. It's a silent invitation to see the truth, not just the image. It's also important to recognize that for avoidance, showing vulnerability doesn't mean they'll suddenly become emotionally fluent. It means they're beginning to take emotional risks. They might not say what they feel with clarity, but you'll see it in how they linger when saying goodbye, how their voice softens when they talk about you, how they ask deeper questions and listen longer than they used to. Their vulnerability is a slow drip, not a flood. But each drop matters. Each one signals a shift from fear to connection, from avoidance to attachment, from guarded independence to emotional courage. When an avoidant starts making space for you in their routine and future plans, it's one of the clearest indicators that they are emotionally investing at a much deeper level than they normally allow themselves to. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, autonomy and independence aren't just preferences. they are essential coping strategies. Their lives are structured in ways that minimize dependence on others. They guard their time, energy, and emotional bandwidth with intensity. Their calendar, their space, and their decisions are often designed to serve one purpose: self-protection. So when that person starts to shift their routine to include you, it's not a small gesture. It's a radical act of emotional openness. At first, the changes might be subtle. Maybe they invite you to join them in their regular routines: grocery runs, gym sessions, a morning coffee ritual. These invitations might not seem like much on the surface, but they reflect a major internal shift. For an avoidant, routines are sacred. They represent control and safety. Letting you into those routines means they're letting you into the inner architecture of their life. It means you're becoming part of their safe space, not just someone they visit in moments of emotional vulnerability, but someone who is being integrated into the everyday rhythm of their world. You'll notice they begin to check in with you before making plans. They consider your schedule, your preferences, your needs. They begin to align their actions with your availability and desires. This isn't about losing their autonomy, it's about choosing to share it. Avoidants don't naturally adjust their lives for others, especially not in a consistent way. When they start doing that, it shows that your presence in their life is no longer optional or peripheral, it's becoming central. Future planning is another powerful signal. Avoidants typically keep their long-term plans close to the chest. They like to map out their goals without interference. Their default mode is to plan alone, to dream alone, to act alone. But then something shifts. Suddenly, they're using words like "we" when talking about upcoming months. They begin referencing events or experiences that include you without needing to be prompted. They start picturing a future that involves your presence, and they talk about it. That's not just inclusion, it's emotional investment. The nature of these plans can vary. Maybe it's a vacation 6 months away, or a conversation about moving closer together. Maybe it's even smaller, mentioning what holidays might look like next year, or casually asking what you'd think about a shared project. What matters isn't the scale of the plan, but the mindset behind it. For the avoidant, making room for someone in the future is risky. It means opening themselves to the possibility of disappointment, dependence, or change. It goes against their instinct to keep life tightly controlled. So when they begin including you in their future thinking, they are trusting not just you, but the connection itself. They are betting on something bigger than fear. It may not be linear. One moment they're inviting you into every part of their life, and the next they might seem to retreat. This oscillation is part of the process. Avoidants often test the waters, stepping forward, then pulling back when the vulnerability feels too exposed. But if you look at the trend over time, you'll see growth. You'll see increasing consistency. You'll see more intentional overlap between their world and yours. They may even begin to ask for your input on decisions that affect them personally. That's huge. An avoidant who once made every choice in isolation begins to invite your perspective. Not because they can't decide on their own, but because they want your opinion. That desire to collaborate, to include, to align, that's the hallmark of someone who is slowly dismantling their emotional walls. You'll also begin to notice shifts in how they manage their time. Avoidants are known for needing a lot of personal space and alone time to feel grounded. That won't go away entirely. But when they start choosing to spend more of that time with you, not out of obligation, but because they want to, it's a signal. It means being around you no longer feels like a threat to their autonomy. It feels like a complement to it. Even their environment might change. They make physical space for you, a drawer, a toothbrush, a spot on the calendar that is consistently yours. These aren't just logistical changes. They are symbolic. For someone who has always lived with emotional distance, rearranging their world to accommodate someone else is an act of love spoken through action rather than words. When an avoidant begins to shift from physical presence to emotional presence, it marks a powerful evolution in how they relate to intimacy. Avoidant individuals often navigate relationships through a careful balance of proximity and distance. They may be physically present, showing up to dates, sending messages, making time, but still emotionally distant. This isn't out of malice or manipulation. It's how they protect themselves from the vulnerability that true emotional connection requires. Being in the room is one thing, being truly in it with another person, available, receptive, connected, that's a whole different level. And for an avoidant, it's the hardest place to stay. At the start, avoidants can seem attentive. They may engage in the rituals of dating and companionship, but with a subtle wall in place. They listen, but they don't reveal. They touch, but they don't open up. They might engage in activities together, share space, and even express affection, but they keep their inner world compartmentalized. Their presence is felt physically, but not emotionally. It can feel like something is always just slightly out of reach. The conversations are there, but they don't go deep. The laughter is there, but the emotional intimacy feels limited. This is their comfort zone. They are close enough to enjoy connection, but not so close that they risk being truly seen. Then something shifts. It might begin with eye contact that lingers just a little longer, or the way they start asking you about things that matter, your fears, your dreams, your past. They begin listening differently, not just to respond, but to understand. They start remembering details, not because they're trying to impress, but because those details have become important to them. They begin to empathize more freely, to acknowledge your feelings without needing to fix them or escape from them. This is the quiet transformation where emotional presence begins to take the place of superficial closeness. For an avoidant, emotional presence doesn't come naturally. It requires them to remain engaged even when their instincts scream for space. It means sitting in emotional tension without fleeing. It means allowing themselves to be seen not just in moments of strength or charm, but in moments of doubt, fear, and insecurity. So when they begin to do this, it's not accidental. It's a sign that they're choosing connection over comfort. They're staying present, not just physically, but emotionally. You may notice they start responding differently when conflict arises. Instead of shutting down or withdrawing, they begin to stay in the conversation. They may still struggle, still get overwhelmed, but they don't vanish. They begin to hold emotional space, not just for themselves, but for you. They listen when you're hurting. They stay engaged when things get messy. That kind of presence from someone who usually retreats is one of the clearest signals that love is starting to override fear. They also begin to share more of themselves in real time. Not just reflections from the past, but what they're feeling now in the moment. I'm scared. This feels new. I don't know what to do with this, but I want to figure it out. These aren't just admissions. They're bridges. Bridges that connect their internal world to the person sitting across from them. For the avoidant, letting someone walk across that bridge takes courage they may have never accessed before. But when they begin to build that bridge with you, it means you matter in a way that transcends physical proximity. Even silence becomes different. It's no longer cold or distant, but shared and comfortable. You start to feel their presence even when words aren't spoken. Their body language softens, their guard lowers. They don't feel the need to perform or impress. They can simply be, and they allow you to simply be as well. That shared emotional space is where real intimacy lives, and for an avoidance to offer it is a deeply significant shift, you'll notice that they begin to tune in to your emotional states too. They start asking questions like, how are you really feeling? Or is something bothering you? Not just out of curiosity, but out of genuine concern. They're present for you not just as a companion, but as a partner. Someone who is emotionally invested in your well-being and open to sharing their own emotional landscape in return. That exchange, however subtle it may seem, marks a move from transactional closeness to transformative connection. For someone who has spent much of their life avoiding emotional exposure, stepping into emotional presence means they're not just staying, they're choosing to show up fully. When an avoidance fear of closeness begins to shift into a willingness to risk connection, it marks one of the most profound transformations in how they relate to love. At their core, avoidant individuals are driven by the need to protect themselves from emotional overwhelm. They have often learned through experience that closeness can mean pain, entrapment, or a loss of control. So they build walls, not because they don't feel, but because they feel so deeply that it terrifies them. They keep love at arm's length, not to reject it, but to manage its intensity. Their default is distance, detachment, and self-sufficiency. But when love begins to move past their defenses, you'll see something powerful start to emerge. The subtle, brave decision to lean in despite the fear. This shift rarely looks dramatic at first. It can begin with something as simple as letting someone see their indecision. The avoidant, who once needed to appear always in control, begins to admit they don't have all the answers. They start expressing hesitation, vulnerability, emotional conflict. They begin to say things like, I don't know how to do this, but I want to try. Or, this is hard for me, but I'm still here. Those words are not just statements. They are small acts of rebellion against their own emotional programming. What makes this shift so powerful is that it goes against everything their nervous system has been conditioned to do. Avoidants are experts at shutting down when emotions rise. When intimacy grows, so does the pressure. But then something inside them changes. Instead of shutting the door, they start cracking. Find it open. They begin to tolerate closeness longer than they used to. They begin to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. They begin to let the relationship breathe without needing to control every moment of connection. Their willingness to risk connection doesn't mean the fear goes away. In fact, the fear is still very much alive, but something stronger is beginning to rise. The desire to experience something real, something intimate, something that doesn't rely on control or distance to survive. They begin to confront the reality that real love requires risk. It requires uncertainty. It requires showing up when it would be easier to retreat. You'll start to see it in how they handle emotional moments. Where they once would have ghosted or withdrawn after an intense interaction, now they circle back. They check in, they want to make things right, even if they're awkward or unsure how to do it. That effort is not about perfection, it's about intention. They are beginning to value connection more than the safety of avoidance. Every time they show up emotionally, even if they're stumbling through it, they are building new emotional muscles. They may start to express their emotions more freely, even if it's uncomfortable. They may let you see moments of stress or sadness without hiding. They begin to believe, in small but growing ways, that closeness doesn't always mean losing themselves. They test the idea that love doesn't have to hurt, that it doesn't have to mean sacrifice of identity or control, that connection can coexist with independence. This is revolutionary for someone who has always believed the opposite. In their actions, you may see a softening. They touch more often, with intention. They look at you with less guardedness. They don't just make time for you, they make room for your feelings. They ask more questions. They stay in the room longer, both physically and emotionally. They become curious about what you need instead of being defensive. This isn't because their fear has vanished. It's because they're starting to value love more than they fear being hurt by it. Their internal dialogue begins to change too. Where they once thought, if I get too close, I'll lose myself, they begin to wonder, what if closeness could strengthen me? Where they once believed needing someone is weakness, they begin to feel letting someone in takes strength. These are not instant changes. They unfold slowly through experience, through repetition, through the emotional safety that begins to take root in the relationship. Sometimes the shift is silent. You won't always get declarations of love or neatly packaged explanations, but you'll feel it in the way they show up. You'll notice it in the pauses they're willing to sit with, the hard conversations they're willing to stay inside of, the openness in their body language when the walls should be up. Their risk isn't in what they say, it's in what they allow themselves to feel without running from it. And when an avoidant begins to risk connection, even in small ways, it's one of the most genuine and courageous signs that love is starting to lead their decisions instead of fear.